Good evening, everybody, all members, officers, and no, there are no members of the public that I can see, but for the purposes of the recording, welcome to any members of the public who are joining us on the live stream facility. Welcome to today's meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. Today is, of course, the 8th of July 2021. If I just run through the housekeeping procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer and assemble at Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and it will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Is there anyone here who intends to film the proceedings? No. For the benefit of the members of the public who may not be able to see at this point, the answer is no. Speaking under Rule 20.1, I've not received any request to speak under Rule 20.1, but are there any members in the room who would like to speak? Okay, thank you. And public speaking, I've not received any requests for public speaking. There being no members of the public present, the answer for that is also no. So, just before I move to the election of the chair, because I might only be here for a few minutes, I would like to thank Councillor Bob Bayford for the excellent work he did that I was aware of in watching him when I attended these meetings, and the calm and collected manner in which he conducted them, and the preparation that together with yourselves he was able to make for the work programme. So thanks to him for that. The first substantive item then is the election of a chair. Are there any nominations, please? Yes, Councillor King.
I'd like to nominate Alan Curry.
Thank you. Are there any more nominations? Councillor Piper.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Stuart Piper.
Can we have seconders for each of those proposals, please?
I second it.
Which one are you seconding, please, Councillor Fellows?
Stuart Piper.
Thank you.
Now second Alan Curry, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Thank you, members. Are there any more? It's apparent that obviously my name is one of them, so at this point I have to vacate the chair that I sit, and just in case there's any misunderstanding as to why, although I am only the vice chairman of this committee at the moment, the chair that I'm operating from is the chair of this committee, so I do have to leave the room whilst I hand over to Nick Hughes to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. So what we'll do now, in order to ensure that the election of the actual chairman or the vote has a councillor who has a casting vote, what we'll do is we'll run a election of a temporary chairman to oversee the election of chairman, if that makes sense to members. So can I have a proposer for a temporary chair, please?
Can I just ask, should I leave the room as well?
No, you are okay to stay because you're not presiding in the election of the chairman. So that's okay, that's fine. Councillor Fellows.
I nominate Councillor Lindemann.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Tomlinson. Are there any other nominations to be the temporary chairman? Nope. Okay, so Councillor Piper is now in the chair.
I feel really weird. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of doing this. We have two candidates, Councillor Alan Curry and Councillor Stuart Piper. Will those in favour of Councillor Stuart Piper being the chairman of this committee, will you please raise your hands? Do I get a vote? Thank you very much. And those who would like Councillor Alan Curry to be the chairman, would you please raise your hands? Are there any abstentions? Oh, Councillor Trish Austin. Okay. Thank you very much, councillors. It was 8-4 in favour of Councillor Stuart Piper, who will now be the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. Thank you very much.
Forgot to put the mic on. Thank you very much. I will try to do it as well as I mentioned Councillor Bayford did, by giving everybody the opportunity to speak as often as is necessary for the item that's being discussed to be thoroughly discussed. Councillor King.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Alan Curry as Vice Chair.
Thank you very much.
I think you need to take guidance from the...
Now, I'm just going to turn to you and say, is that happening today? Yeah, okay.
So I was under the impression that the vice chair is not up for elections this evening.
So was I. I'm just seeking advice.
From what I gather, I thought the leader of the council chooses the...
Sorry. So, because the vice chairmancy or vice chairman's position has been vacated, that's a casual vacancy, which is always done at the panel, rather than at full council, which is done only at annual council. So there is the opportunity, if members want to appoint a vice chairman at this meeting, or it can roll forward to the next the next scrutiny meeting, which is at the end of 20th of July, isn't it? Yeah, on the 20th of July. So it's up to the panel to decide. We can either do it tonight or on the 20th.
Members, I'm quite happy. Microphone. Members, I'm quite happy to go with the election this evening if you'd like to. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Councillor. Councillor Fellows.
I'll second that, Chair.
Nominated by Councillor Moore. Thank you. Councillor Paul Moore.
And then Councillor Keane nominated.
Yes, I've got Councillor Keane nominated Councillor Curry, and seconded by, thank you, and a seconder for Councillor Fellows, please. Thank you. That's Councillor Coleman Cook. Thank you very much. In the order in which the nominations came to me then, I think is the fairest way to do it. Can I have a show of hands, please, so all those in favour of the Vice Chairman or Chairperson being Councillor Curry? All those in favour, please. And all those in favour of Councillor Fellows, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Fellows then is then appointed as the Vice Chair of this committee. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I've just been reminded by Councillor Orwell, I'm not a member of this committee, so my vote doesn't count, sorry.
I wasn't counting, don't worry.
And I'm sorry I didn't see your hand anyway. I was looking that way. Thank you very much for that. Then moving on with the agenda, the apologies for absence. I've received apologies from the following members: Councillor Huxley, substituted by Councillor Whitehead, and Councillor Scott, substituted by Councillor Wright. And as you are now aware, Councillor Fellows is with this committee, replacing Councillor Bayford. Are there any more apologies? I think everyone else is here. Thank you very much. Next item is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to be made? Thank you very much. Substantive agenda item number 4 then is the proposed disposal of 18 Albert Street, the call-in of this previously made cabinet decision. So I will now ask Bob Porter to please introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Good evening. I'm not going to say very much by way of introduction, other than to say that the report that was considered by Cabinet on the 17th of June is attached to the report that you see this evening. And just a little bit in terms of the background, the property in Albert Street is owned by the council, and it's held in the council's housing revenue account. And that account is ring-fenced for the purposes of providing housing for residents in the district. And there are rules about the way that assets held within that housing revenue account are used and funded. When that property, it was shared ownership property, when it became vacant, we negotiated to purchase back the share so that the situation could be resolved. It's a property in very poor condition, and the previous shared ownership owners were unable to undertake the work. Following that, we then looked at the various options for that property, including bringing it back into use as affordable housing, which, say, is the main purpose of the housing revenue account. For a number of reasons, we concluded that that wasn't appropriate, partly because of the cost, and partly because of the poor layout inside the building. The accommodation is spread over 3 floors. There's a very narrow, steep and winding staircase. There's no outside amenity space, so that it wouldn't really make a suitable home for family accommodation. So for those 2 reasons, we concluded it wasn't suitable for retention in the housing revenue account for the provision of affordable housing. And that led to the recommendations for disposal. Obviously, myself and Councillor Jill Bayford, Cabinet Member for Housing, are here this evening. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Porter. Councillor Bayford, thank you very much for coming. Is there anything you would like to add at this point?
Thank you, Chair. It's just that the question seems to focus on why this property wasn't included in the Ramsgate bid. I'm unable to say why it wasn't, because it wasn't this administration that decided that. However, as Bob said, it's an HRA property, and as far as I can see, there would have been no reason to consider it for anything other than to raise money to put back into the HRA fund to support housing for rent, which is desperately needed. Its condition and the potential cost of renovation have already been discussed, so I'm satisfied that its sale is the most economic option and that due process has been followed. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Bayford. Members of the panel, do you have any comments that you'd like to make? Trouble with swapping my glasses is... Councillor Austin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a property that is in an up-and-coming area of Ramsgate. Yes, it's in a dreadful state, but it is a historic asset, and Ramsgate members are very concerned at the loss of historic assets from the council's asset register. We really wanted to check that all options had been considered, and this was not looking at the previous Levelling Up Fund bid, but looking at other potential bids as part of the Ramsgate Future programme that the regeneration team are looking at the moment, to see which is specifically about Ramsgate's historic assets. We have a heritage action zone. We have a close relationship with Historic England and other likely funders. We've got this Ramsgate Future programme, which is looking at specifically at this type of asset. It's difficult to find any evidence that that Cabinet has considered anything other than housing options, and we quite see that housing is not a suitable option for this property, and that it would need far too much renovation in any event for that. But we do consider that there are other possibilities for this building. We've had a paper produced by a trainee architect that I know Councillor Bayford and Mr Porter have seen, looking at the possibility that it might be a community asset, a cafe, a gallery, Airbnb, community space, if we could get grant funding to restore it. The training organisation, the Liberty Group across the road, is very interested in collaborating with the council on developing the building, with a view to the young people that they train being trained in heritage asset renovation, which is something that Historic England is extremely keen on pushing at the moment. That's the kind of project that would appeal massively to external funders. It's exactly the kind of thing it would give training and potential and a feeling of ownership to those young people, and it would be a community project that would develop those skills and training in precisely the way that the Levelling Up Fund is trying to do, to develop potential of young people in our area. Those are just two possibilities. Now, we do know that the housing revenue account is a ring-fenced account and that it has specific rules that concern it. That's why I proposed under 24.1 at the Cabinet meeting that Cabinet consider delaying this for a period of 3 months so that we could explore with the regeneration team whether there were any possibilities for bringing in external funding to put into the housing revenue account to compensate the account for the loss of this building and to develop it in other directions. But that was not considered. I'm a new councillor. I was a bit dismayed, to be honest, to discover that the process at Cabinet is you speak and then, you know, that's it. There isn't a discussion. I hadn't realised that. And that Councillor Bayford had her response ready for whatever it was I'd said. So if I'd said I think we should burn down the building and claim on the insurance, the response felt like it would be the same. And that felt to me like perhaps we weren't considering all the options as widely as we might, and that it perhaps behoved the council to think again about what the options might be for this beautiful but very, very badly neglected building. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to chip in relation to the Levelling Up bid, as that's what the question originally focused on. So if everyone looks, I don't know who has the laptops open, but top page 6. So in terms of it going forwards as part of the Levelling Up bid, if I quote directly, there's no approved budget in the General Capital Programme to facilitate this purchase because it would have to be bought by the General Fund in order to enable that. Moreover, it should also be noted that the Levelling Up bid was approved on the provision that there would not be a cash contribution from the authority, nor an expectation that the Council would be underwriting any financial contributions referenced by 10% match in the Government's narrative that are required from the private sector. So, in brief answer, the money wasn't allocated in order to purchase it, and the terms of the Levelling Up Fund meant that it couldn't be included in that way. For me, the primary focus was what the HRA is. The HRA is there to provide housing, and we have to look at how we provide the best value for money in order to do that, in order to purchase as many properties as possible. In order to renovate this, if we were doing it on our own, we would effectively run into negative in terms of providing accommodation, and that would be a significant struggle for us. So that's why it was considered in that sense in terms of the Levelling Up Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Keane, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can quite understand that it couldn't be part of the Levelling Up Fund, and I agree that, you know, obviously this is already ring-fenced money, so we've got to look at it for housing. But what would be the harm in delaying for 3 months to look at other sources of funding for some of the ideas that Councillor Austin has suggested?
Thank you. I think I saw another hand. Did I see another hand at the back? Councillor Paul Moore, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of Bob Porter's recommendation to get rid of this property. I'm also in allegiance with Councillor Whitehead in what she was talking about, levelling up and that sort of thing. This property is dilapidated. We don't have the funds for it. Delaying it will only mean that we won't have the money coming in for the HRA, which we need. This was already discussed and proposed in the previous meetings, and was passed by the previous people in charge, and I think by delaying it will not benefit anyone other than just getting the property in a worse state, and we'll get less money for it. So I think we should just get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other members? You can come back, yes, come on.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, I wasn't suggesting it should have been part of the Levelling Up Fund because that was a geographically specific bid and it's outside the area. But it does have potential to be part of the Ramsgate Future programme, which is looking at historic buildings. And yes, there is the issue about that it might decline further, but on the other hand, frankly, the way that property values in that area of Ramsgate are increasing, I think that will be more than balanced over 3 months by the increase in property value generally. So I would refer you back to Councillor Keane's question: what harm would there be in delaying simply for 3 months? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to take guidance from Mr. Hughes at the moment, if necessary, but my understanding is that any call-in needs to be specifically related to the procedure that the Cabinet has followed, and I'm struggling to find out whether a delay fits the procedure.
The delay was the proposal to respond to the fact that the procedure we felt hadn't been followed because the full range of options hadn't been considered. I don't know whether that's a justifiable argument.
Thank you, members. I'll just wait for an advice. So the answer that I've received is yes, it is a viable option that you could make as a recommendation if you wish in just a few moments, but I'd like to go back to Mr. Porter, please, first to see if there's anything else that he would like to add.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Well, there's the question about the delay. Would there be any negative implications of delay? And the advice that I gave to Cabinet at the meeting was that the property is in very poor condition and delay would see it deteriorate further. So, I shared that information at the time, and I think my recommendation would be not to delay, but to make an early decision about what to do with the property so that further deterioration could be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter.
I wonder whether it would be possible, Bob, could you possibly say you know, the likelihood or the possibility of being able to explore additional funding to compensate the HRA. I don't know whether that's possible. Because we've said, and you said in your report, that if you wanted to do something with this building other than what you're proposing, we would have to get the general fund to buy it from the HRA. So I think what Councillor Austin is suggesting is that instead of doing that, or you know, to compensate in some way, we get the external funding, whatever that might be, to compensate the HRA. But I don't know whether that's possible, and I don't know whether you can comment on that.
I'm not sure I'm really the right person to comment on that either, really, to be honest. I understand the workings of the housing revenue account and what resources are available, but I can say, I mean, it wasn't in the original report to Cabinet, but I can say in the build-up to preparing the report, I had discussions with the Director of Regeneration about whether there were alternative options, and the view was that actually there weren't likely sources of funding for that property. So, clearly the budget implications are in this report because they were drafted by the Deputy 151 officer in preparing this report for the panel. And it would be a matter for full council about whether it wanted to allocate any funding to transfer this from the HRA into the general fund. I can't really answer about how realistic that prospect is, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. A question from the chair, please. I'm going to try not to ask too many questions at these meetings, but if there is local interest in acquiring this building to make good use of it, it seems to me that to acquire the building now, or at least as soon as possible, would be a good idea given its likely increase in value. Is there any way in which that local interest could in fact bid at the auction to buy it, or is it the case that they would need to have hoped for funding from other agencies in place already? I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
I think this is something that Councillor Bayford suggested actually in response to the architect who wrote in with some ideas that he go ahead and purchase it himself. The difficulty with that is that the amount that we would need to refurbish the building is substantial. We would have to go for grant funding for that. I'd say a combination, for example, of the training organisation and the council would be in a really strong position to get that grant funding, and private individuals simply wouldn't.
Thank you very much. Any more comments from members, please?
Thank you, Chair, and well done for taking the chair. I have read the report, Bob's report, and as always excellent and given us the guidance which we're talking about tonight. Totally understand Councillor Austin's views about, shall we say, the community taking on board a property like this. I mean, I know of the property. I haven't seen it recently, but I know of it. And yes, it is sad to see our lovely old buildings deteriorate. My concern about if it went to community, and we see it so often, and most of us have been involved in community things, projects or whatever, they can be taken over, but all the best will in the world, by whoever. And then they run out of money. And I feel quite strongly about this, having seen, I always say, with this part of the world in Margate, certain organisations this has happened to. Say they mean well, they take on, it might be a council property, and then the next thing you find they're crying out for funds because it hasn't sadly worked. So my own feeling, I think we should go with the what the officers and Mr. Porter's recommendation is to put it out for auction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
The proposal was that the council retained ownership of the building, not that it went to a community organisation, but that obviously is something that would need to be discussed.
Thank you very much. We can come to that in just a second when, if there are no more comments that members would like to make, it seems to me that we have two ideas that have been suggested which would need to form a proposal. One is coming from yourself, I think, Councillor Austin, in just a minute, and then one, I believe, from yourself, Councillor Moore.
Only in to agree with what
Yes.
has been propositioned, yes.
Those are the two options that we have before us, to take no further action and or to refer it back to Cabinet, setting out the recommendations from this panel. So to do that, we will need a proposal, which will require a proposer, a seconder, and a vote.
So my proposal would be to delay the sale for 3 months to enable discussion with the Director of Regeneration and potential funders who might be willing to contribute to the refurbishment of the building as part of the Ramsgate Future Programme.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I hope Charles is able to write faster than me. I got most of it. That is a proposal then from Councillor Austin. Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Keane, thank you very much. Are there any other proposals from the floor? Councillor Paul Moore, please.
Only mine, Chairman, which is to take no further action.
And do we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Tomlinson, I've seen your hand. Thank you. Okay, the proposal made by Councillor Austin, proposed and seconded by Councillor Keane. Can we have a show of hands for those in favour of that proposal, please? Thank you. The proposal from Councillor Paul Moore that we take no further action, which confirms the decision the Council has made. Can we have a show of hands in favour of that proposal, please? Seven. Are there any abstentions? I should make it clear, is this for the first proposal or the second, or... Because I didn't ask for the first proposal. No. Any abstentions? 2, 3. Thank you very much. So it's the decision is. So the decision, panel members, thank you for the discussion, is that this panel takes no further action, and therefore the Cabinet decision is confirmed. Thank you very much for all your comments. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I now declare this meeting closed according to that clock at 19:33.
Could I thank everyone for their time and apologise for bringing you out on yet another evening? Thank you.